In a quiet suburban street, one woman thought she could use prejudice as power. Her son demanded what wasn't his, and when refused, she called the cops, certain that justice was on her side. But what she didn't know was that the man she tried to humiliate was the very police commander she had just summoned. This is the story of arrogance, prejudice, and the day it all came crashing down. The sun hung low over Crestwood Heights, casting a warm golden glow across the rows of perfect houses. Lawns were trimmed like carpets, fences painted to shine white, and driveways spotless as if no dust dared to land there. On the surface, the neighborhood looked like the picture of the American dream. But perfection has cracks, and sometimes those cracks are filled with prejudice. On her porch stood Karen Whitmore. Her sharp eyes scanned the street like a security camera no one had asked for. Neighbors knew her well, always ready to complain, always ready to judge. She was the kind of woman who could spot a child playing too loudly from 2 blocks away and make it a committee issue. Beside her was her teenage son, Kyle. With a slouched posture and a smirk that never seemed to leave his lips, he carried the arrogance of someone who had never been told no in his life. Kyle lived in a bubble, his mother's rules and his entitlement shielding him from the real world. As they watched, a black SUV rolled smoothly into the street and parked just a few houses away. Out stepped a man carrying several grocery bags. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his movements calm but firm. His t-shirt and jeans were simple, but the way he carried himself spoke of quiet confidence. Karen's eyes narrowed. She leaned slightly toward Kyle. "See that?" she whispered, her voice coated with suspicion. "People like him don't live here, probably just passing through, or worse." Kyle followed her gaze and let out a short laugh. The man placed his groceries carefully on the porch, making sure nothing fell. Kyle's smirk grew darker. "Bet he won't mind sharing some of those bags with us," he muttered under his breath. The man paid them no attention, focused only on his groceries. His presence was calm, almost dignified. But for Karen and Kyle, calm wasn't enough. To them, his very existence in their space was a provocation. What neither of them knew was that this man wasn't just another neighbor. He wasn't someone to be dismissed, or looked down on, or threatened. He was someone who had spent his life protecting communities exactly like this one. Someone whose authority reached far beyond Crestwood Heights. But prejudice has a way of blinding people. And before the sun would set on this quiet neighborhood, Karen and Kyle's ignorance would lead them into a confrontation they would never forget. The street was still, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. The man continued unloading his groceries, each bag placed carefully on the porch, as though every item mattered. His presence was calm, almost comforting, yet to Karen and Kyle, that calmness felt like defiance. Kyle's smirk twisted into a sneer. He stuffed his hands into his hoodie pocket and stepped off the porch, walking toward the man with lazy arrogance. Karen didn't stop him. In fact, she folded her arms tighter, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous kind of approval. "Hey," Kyle called out, his voice loud enough to cut through the quiet street. "Why don't you hand some of those groceries over? You don't need all that stuff." The man looked up slowly. His dark eyes met Kyle's with a calm that seemed to unsettle more than anger would have. He straightened his shoulders, his voice deep but measured. "I'm sorry, young man. These are my groceries. Bought them with my own money. You'll have to get yours the same way." For a moment there was silence. The refusal was polite, but to Kyle it was an insult. His cheeks flushed red. "You talking back to me?" he snapped. "You don't even belong here. People like you." "Enough, Kyle." The man's voice cut sharp, firm without being loud. "Go home. Respect works both ways." From the porch, Karen gasped as though she had just witnessed a crime. her face twisted with outrage. "How dare you?" she shouted, storming down the steps toward them. "You don't talk to my son that way. Who do you think you are?" The man didn't flinch. He simply bent down, picked up another grocery bag, and placed it on the porch. His silence only fueled Karen's anger. "You don't belong in this neighborhood," she barked, her voice echoing down the quiet street. "I've seen your kind before. Always trouble, always thinking you can walk in and take over. Well, not here. Not in Crestwood Heights." Neighbors began peeking out from their windows, curtains shifting ever so slightly. The scene was turning into a spectacle. Karen, realizing she had an audience, puffed herself up even more. "You think you can disrespect my son and get away with it?" she yelled. "I'm calling the police." She pulled out her phone with dramatic fury, her fingers already dialing 911. Kyle grinned wickedly. To him, this was victory. He was certain the police would arrive, see a black man with bags on a porch, and drag him away in handcuffs. He couldn't wait. But the man remained still, standing tall and composed, as though he knew something they didn't. His eyes held a quiet power, one that neither Karen nor Kyle could recognize, at least not yet. In that moment, a storm was brewing. What began as arrogance was about to turn into humiliation. What Karen and Kyle thought would be their triumph was destined to become the day they would never forget. The street had fallen silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the police cruiser's engine and the rustle of leaves in the evening air. Neighbors who once hid behind curtains now stood openly in their yards, eyes fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. Karen's face was drained of color. She clutched Kyle's arm as if holding him could protect her from the shame pressing down on her chest. Kyle, once bold and arrogant, now looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, his eyes wide, his mouth opening and closing, but producing no sound. The commander stood tall, his presence commanding the space without effort. He didn't raise his voice, didn't step forward, didn't threaten. He didn't need to. His very posture spoke louder than any accusation Karen had made. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly, "false accusations carry consequences, especially when they're fueled by prejudice." Karen stammered, I didn't know. I thought—" "You thought wrong," the commander replied, his tone calm but unyielding. "And that's the problem. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong. You encouraged your son to take what wasn't his. And when I refused, you called the police, expecting them to back your lie." The words hit like stones. Karen's shoulders slumped. She wanted to protest, to spin another excuse, but the murmurs of the neighbors reminded her that this time there was no saving face. Everyone had seen. Everyone had heard. Kyle finally broke his silence, his voice trembling. "We didn't mean it. We just thought—" The commander turned his gaze on the boy. For the first time, his stern expression softened, not with sympathy but with something deeper, a lesson unspoken. "Son," he said slowly, "life will teach you this. Respect is not optional. You don't demand it with arrogance. You earn it by showing it first. If you don't learn that now, the world will teach you the hard way." Kyle dropped his eyes to the ground, shame burning hotter than any punishment. The officer stepped closer to Karen. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us. Filing a false report is a crime." Gasps rippled through the neighborhood. Karen's knees nearly buckled. She begged with her eyes, but the commander didn't intervene. Instead, he simply picked up his remaining grocery bags, calm as ever. Before leaving, he addressed the gathered neighbors. His voice carried like thunder wrapped in wisdom. "Let this be clear," he said. "Prejudice doesn't belong here, or anywhere. This community can only be safe if it's built on respect, not suspicion. Remember that." The neighbors nodded silently, some even clapping softly, their eyes filled with a new kind of respect, not just for his position, but for his dignity. Karen was escorted toward the cruiser, her protests weak, her authority shattered. Kyle stood frozen on the porch, watching the only world he knew crumble in a single evening. The commander walked back to his SUV, loading the last of his groceries with the same calm grace he had carried from the start. He didn't gloat. He didn't taunt. He simply lived the lesson he had just spoken. Respect, earned and given. As he drove away, the neighborhood remained silent, each person reflecting on what they had witnessed. For some, it was humiliation. For others, revelation. But for all, it was unforgettable.